Thinking about buying an epoxy surfboard? Make sure you watch this first. Hi guys, Chris from Stoked here. Welcome back to the channel. Now before I get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any video goodness. Now today we're going to be talking about epoxy surfboards. It's one of the main types of surfboard construction out there. And a lot of people are kind of making the decision whether they want to go with epoxy surfboards or standard PU fiberglass boards. As with any type of construction, there's pros and cons for it. So we're going to be running through those today so you can make the right decision for you. So yeah, let's jump straight in. First off is durability. Now for me, this is one of the biggest pros of epoxy surfboard construction and one of the main reasons I really like riding epoxy boards. They're super durable and that's one of the great things about them. They're great for people who travel. Some of the kind of more beginner style boards like the NSPs and the BICs epoxies are great for learners because they're pretty much ding proof and really durable and long lasting. So yeah, that for me is one of the biggest pros of epoxy surfboards is the durability. Now on the flip side, one of the biggest downsides and cons of epoxy surfboards is the pricing. They do tend to be more expensive than their PU fiberglass counterparts. So even if you're looking at the same board in both models, it'll generally be a little bit more expensive for the epoxy construction. So yeah, if you are searching around and you're on a bit of a budget, epoxy surfboards can be a bit pricey. Next up is weight. Now this falls in both the pro and the con category, depending on how you look at it. Pro is they do tend to be a little bit lighter than the standard fiberglass boards, which is great for traveling. I carry two epoxy firewire boards in my board bag and they fit in under 15 kilos, even with all my surf gear in the bag as well, which is a great advantage to fiberglass boards. On the flip side though, with the weight, because they are a little bit lighter, if you're surfing kind of not quite optimal conditions, there's a bit of wind, a bit of chop on the face, they aren't as great and they can get caught up in the lip a little bit. So depending on where you fall in how kind of light or heavy you like your boards, the epoxy boards can be a pro or a con. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is buoyancy, and again it's one of those things that can be a pro or a con depending on how you like your surfboards to feel. Now epoxy boards overall kind of feel like they sit a bit higher in the water, and the word that's often used to describe this is kind of corky because they kind of sit there and bob about on the top a bit more. Now for kind of the beginner end of the spectrum, this can be a great advantage because it feels like you've got a little bit more foam underneath you and can be a little bit more forgiving. Also it means you can kind of drop down the size slightly with epoxy boards. Kind of feels like you're surfing with maybe 1.5 litres more foam volume underneath you than you actually are. So that's another kind of thing to keep in mind. At the higher end of the spectrum, in terms of like higher end, intermediate, advanced, expert surfers, some people do feel like they feel a bit more disconnected from the wave when they're surfing on epoxy boards. So it really comes down to personal preference. Just put that in context though, it's really kind of a personal decision. Obviously you've got expert surfers like Kelly Slater surfing Slater Designs, which are an epoxy board, right through to pros who obviously prefer the fiberglass one. So it's really personal preference, but buoyancy is something you should also keep in mind. Another great advantage of epoxy surfboard construction is they are great to travel with, and obviously for me as a traveling surfer, that is one of the biggest advantages and the reasons I've switched over to a lot of epoxy surfboards. The durability and the weight add into this, but overall epoxy boards are great to travel with. Now I know we've already talked about durability as a big advantage for epoxy surfboard construction, but the flip side of it is if you do ding it, the ding repair on boards is a bit of a disadvantage. Just because of the construction of epoxy surfboards, they love to soak up the water. So if you do ding it in the water, get out of the water as quickly as you can, dry out your board thoroughly. And that's one of the big things you need to remember when ding repairing an epoxy board. Make sure you do give it time to really dry out. If you repair it and it's still got water in it, it's really going to limit the lifespan overall. So yeah, one of the biggest disadvantages is ding repair. Now the final thing we're going to talk about is the variety of options, and if you're shopping for an epoxy surfboard, this can be a bit of a disadvantage. That's because in comparison to PU or fiberglass boards, there's not as many board brands and options out there as there is in traditional board manufacturing techniques. So if you walk into your local surf shop, the chances are the bulk of them are going to be fiberglass PU boards, and they might have a smaller range of epoxy surfboards. That being said though, there are some brands out there who are really championing the epoxy surfboard construction. I know I've already chatted quite a lot about Firewire boards. They're one of my favorite epoxy surfboards. They have everything from fishers and performance boards right through to longboards, all in epoxy. So yeah, if you are looking for a variety of options, epoxy can be a bit of a disadvantage. Now the other thing I'd like to highlight is the fact that not all epoxy surfboards are the same in terms of durability and strength, and construction does vary between companies. For example, Firewire surfboards, I really love their helium construction, super durable and super light. But on the flip side to that, Firewire also do LFT epoxy boards as well, so the Go Fish and the Seaside and Beyond are examples of that. But it's actually not as strong as their helium, and I don't prefer it as my kind of go-to epoxy surfboard construction. Different brands also vary quite a lot. The Lost Lightspeed technology I really like. It feels really solid and really durable, but it's also a little bit heavier than say the Firewire helium, and it feels a little bit more like a standard PU fiberglass board. There are also other brands that I don't kind of quite rate. The DHD epoxy, I find it feels a little bit brittle, and it wouldn't be my kind of preference or recommendation. So do your research into the type of epoxy boards you're looking at buying, customer reviews and things like that, and make sure you make the right decision for you. And there you have it guys, that's a few things you need to keep in mind if you are shopping around for an epoxy surfboard. If you want any more tips and advice on shopping for surfboard models, make sure you check out the links in the description below to all my surfboard guides, and check out the rest of my YouTube channel for heaps of surfboard reviews, learn to surf guides and more. That's it for this week guys, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.